everybody. Welcome to November 15th. Trips and Traps, Andy Serling and Eric Dopp.
3 races to bring you this week. From a couple of weeks, we'll actually go back to a Breeders' Cup weekend to start things off and finish things off with last weekend. But let's go to the turf on November the 2nd, race number 8 in New York Red. Now winners of 1.
Waiting for, actually, isn't it a maiden race?
I'm sorry, it is a maiden
race. Waiting for this horse, the 12 Coriander. I don't know, but I think they tell the riders before they draw the races what post they have. And this is a classic example of a rider who entered this race with a tough post in a tough situation that had absolutely no game plan. Man, you've got to go or you've got to take back for position.
It's hard to say when you're on the outside. Just play it off the break, and I think that's what Junior Alvarado did here, and it certainly didn't help him because he really didn't commit to taking back or commit to going to the lead here, and he ends up going 4 wide into the first turn.
Yeah, this was, listen, Junior, one thing that's been exceptional about Junior Alvarado is that he's learned by his mistakes as you watched him ride here over the years. He's just a rider who's gotten better. This was a situation where he just had a horse that ends up running reasonably well, all things considered, that was just never in position where he could possibly win this race.
Nope, things down the backstretch here look like, okay, maybe they're settling down a little bit, but Coriander's going to kind of be taken back soon, surprisingly so. I figured you'd want to keep your position after, losing some ground going wide in the turn, but Coriander's going to drop back in here and be toward the back of the field pretty shortly.
He'll be ahead of only one horse, actually, around the 3/8 pole, and it's like, okay, Junior, that's fine, but you needed to make this decision earlier that you wanted to take back in here, and now you see him, he's sort of taking him back a little bit, and he ends up ahead of only the 8 horses. They go to the turn. I don't think it's the other horses are accelerating by him. I think he gave him a little bit of a breather. He's in around the 2 path or so here, but he's never ever had any actual sort of rhythm in here. He was wide. This was just a bad trip for him, and ultimately you're going to see him angle out and run about 5th in here, running at the end. He never had a fair chance, this horse.
No, he didn't. He gets beat about 6 1/4 is the final margin here on Coriander. But you're right. I mean, the decision to take back should have been done at the start when you could have moved him over toward the inside, saved some ground into the first turn, not given up the position you had already had going down the backstretch. So some key mistakes there, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to see him getting against Madame Johar, who finishes second there, because Madame Johar, she'll finish second to just about anybody if she gets in that position. I have to think that these turf maidens, these New York Reds, will get another chance with these horses before the turf season ends. And Coriander for trainer Tom Bush, similar field. I think this is a horse that could run very well and win.
I agree with you. Well, now we'll check out the New York Red now winners of 1. This is the third race from November 3rd, and we're going to take a look at Wishing on a Dream, who breaks from mid-pack, and the outside horse Gambling Fever.
Yeah, now Gambling Fever's trip comes later. The first thing that happens to Wishing on a Dream, who's running this Saturday, the 17th, is that the jockey gets bumped and squeezed early, and this is a horse that just completely loses contact early. That bump at the start is a classic example of how the start can affect a race, because Wishing on a Dream is totally taken out of position on a race where ultimately it was won by the horse that was on the front.
And Gambling Fever will settle into a closer spot here than Wishing on a Dream mid-pack. But it's weird because this race early on, as they go into the first turn here, I'm thinking this is a quick pace. The horses that are behind might be helped by the pace here, but things change as they go down to the backstretch.
Yeah, here's Gambling Fever and here's Wishing on a Dream. This was an exceptional ride by Wilmar Garcia on the winner here, because what he did was he went fast to establish the lead, and then he slows it up. And that was a really good ride, but when he slowed it up, he brought the entire field together, and the horses ended up, particularly Gambling Fever, I think, sort of being in a precarious situation, making what was ultimately a somewhat premature move because of the way the race flowed, but also doing it 4 wide. And behind him is Wishing on a Dream, who ends up back in the picture. But the start just took him out of position, and he had to needlessly be used because of the start. There is Gambling Fever on the outside. You'll see him move 4 wide. Wishing on a Dream is 3 wide in the yellow. The whole field just bunches, Eric.
Yeah, the whole field bunches, and he's taken to the outside to make up that ground there, and just a tough spot that this horse is put in now, because now you're ending up chasing the pace 4 wide when the horse that set the pace, who went pretty quick early but slowed it down late, has some horse left, so you're not going to get over these horses pretty quickly, and now you're on a 4 wide chase around the turn.
Yeah, I thought Gambling Fever was actually, it's a horse that you had picked up on when you liked him a little bit when he wanted to big price that he's really improved his form for Billy Turner and running as well as he'd ever run. He's on the outside. He ends up running second. Now, Wishing on a Dream gets in that spot that I just hate. The rider's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to save ground, but he never finds that window to angle towards the outside. And now he's looking to close inside of horses. Now, he is a horse that likes to run sometimes inside, so I get that. But I think he never got in a comfortable flow position. Gambling Fever never stopped running. But when you think about the start and the way the race was run, I think Wishing on the Dream ran sneaky okay in here. And this is a horse that's run okay 3 straight times. He had that race at Saratoga where he blew out for that 15-length lead in the race, and he actually ran okay and finishing fourth in there. And then he came back and ran decently in a pretty competitive claiming race at Belmont. And then he has this trip, and now he's running Saturday, and he's running against Gossip Column on Saturday. And Gossip Column is a horse that finds ways to lose. There aren't any other killers in there. Gambling Fever's on the A's. He probably doesn't get in. He might be interesting on Saturday.
Yeah, I think so. It could be a good spot from there. You got to take your shot against Gossip Column. Even though Gossip Column's the one to beat in that race for sure, he's found ways to beat himself before.
He has. And listen, he could win, and Wishing on a Dream could be second at a square price. Just think he's a horse that's in sort of quietly pretty good form.
All right, we'll fast forward to last weekend now. This is the first race from Saturday, November 10th. A nice allowance optional claimer. We're taking a look at the 1 Saturday's Charm, who breaks a little slow here, the 3 Reload, and the 4 Consortium.
Yeah, you're going to see Saturday's Charm back here, and he's eventual winner of the race. Here's Consortium coming off the long layoff, and here is Reload. This is an interesting race because Eric and I sort of disagree about it. Not completely disagree, but it's a question of how the race dynamics worked out and who was hurt and who was helped, because ultimately this race did kind of collapse late.
Did kind of collapse. The pace isn't really that fast, though, which was kind of surprising as to how it collapsed. And you have the eventual winner, who's off the screen, Saturday's Charm, who broke slowly, who's way back and last at this point here. You wouldn't think with this pace in here, it's not that fast that Saturday's Charm would be helped here in this scenario.
Yeah, I agree, but sometimes I just look at races by the way they were run as opposed to getting overly caught up in the pace. And maybe that's the wrong way to look at it, and people say the pace is the pace. But what's interesting is Consortium is getting a decent trip, saving ground inside, waiting. My problem with Eddie Castro is I think that he's an over-aggressive rider. I think he makes way too many premature moves. And ultimately, Reload, who's making this move to the lead, here's Consortium, and here's the eventual winner gearing up. I think ultimately Reload moved too soon. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Reload's just not that good. But I think he was the first mover in a race where the last movers were the ones who did better.
It's a fair point. On the other hand, I think Reload's had his chances, and he is putting him into contention at the top of the stretch here, so I can't blame the jockey too much. And Reload, I thought at this point here, watching the race live, had every chance to go on with it and win. But you take a look at it again, you consider all the factors, and maybe you did perhaps move a little bit too soon. What do you think of Consortium? I didn't think he was in a comfortable spot early in the race, down inside chasing. He kind of gets in behind horses a little bit here. First start back up the layoff, he could have run a little bit better. Maybe he had a little bit of a sneaky trip in there.
Okay. I don't think the early position. Let's watch the stretch. And the point, here's Consortium. They're going to line up across here. What happens is Reload is clear of him, but he'll end up drifting. This horse is kind of leaning on him, the eventual winner. And then you see Consortium go in a little bit. At this point, you see Reload's drifting. He's clear. He's not interfering, per se. I think the Consortium should have probably been second, but it was his first race off of almost a year layoff. Maybe he just got a little tired late. I don't mind the early position. He's eating a little dirt maybe, but he has pretty good position behind them. He eases out. He does never get into a comfortable rhythm to make it. I mean, he would have had a perfect trip if he did that because he's sort of sandwiched in. I don't know. It seemed like a good starting spot for Consortium. He's probably better than these horses, and hopefully with that start under his belt, he'll progress because he certainly showed a lot of potential as a 2-year-old, early 3-year-old.
Let's talk about the winner a little bit, Saturday's Charm, who has really done well the last couple of races for Steve Asmussen. Despite getting off slow, was able to win this race. And you talk about dynamics and how the race kind of was upside down at the finish, where the horses back at the pack early on were the ones that were 1-2 under the wire. But he's a horse that clearly is better now than he was ever before.
Absolutely. It's interesting because his last win, he'd got that supersonic pace to close into in a maiden claiming race, but it was a very tough maiden claiming race, so it was close to a maiden special, to be perfectly honest. But he got that crazy pace to close into, so he said, well, his performance, his high buyer was a function of the way the race was run. Then he gets in this race, you say, well, he got kind of off a little bit sluggishly, and it wasn't that fast a pace. And okay, he sort of had dynamics work for him, but maybe he's the one that made dynamics work for him. He clearly seems to be an improving horse for Steve Aston and Toby Sheets.
That's an interesting race to see how you get what your take is on it, including those top 3 horses there.
Yeah, and I gotta say, Reload is not as good as I had thought he was earlier. I mean, that's true. I still think he moved him too soon, but it's tough. Listen, it's an argument and a debate you could have in a lot of different ways. It'll be interesting to see where these horses go, and an interesting race to look at from a dynamic standpoint. We can use your help all the time, trips and traps at NYRANK.com.
Thanks for watching.